Welcome back, everybody. We have another video for you today. Nick Fuentes went on Joel Webbon's podcast, two people that are huge in the right-wing movement right now. Here we go. We're going to watch it. We're going to react to it.
Radical Christian nationalist pastor, Joel Webbon.
Joel Webbon? I'm going to talk about Joel Webbon today.
Joel Webbon has been excellent.
This is exciting. I had no clue that this was coming, but I'm very much pleased, very excited.
Nicholas J. Is it J?
Yes.
Fuentes. In the flesh. Nice to meet you.
Yes, nice to meet you too.
Yeah. So this is actually going to be a 10-part series. It's not just a one and done. You were gracious with your time, came out, spent about half a week with us last fall by the time that this is airing. And we want to do a lot of good with this series. And so it's going to be 10 parts and we are reserving nothing. I gave you my word that, nothing's going to be behind the paywall or, keep it in the vault. You'll never get to see it unless you give us your money. We are going to have kind of some of the raw footage available for ad-free and early access. So if anybody is like, they're watching this, it's the first episode, and they're like, 10? It's 10 parts? I want to get it all, right now. So if you want to binge watch it, you can, and we're going to make that available. You hear about that a little bit later, how to get that. But if you're like, nah, I don't want to have to pay for it, it will all come out, but we're going to do one at a time. So one episode per week for 10 weeks. So this is probably going to go all the way through halfway into March. So I'm excited. So first thing that I thought that we should talk about is America First and Christian nationalism. You're a Christian nationalist, right?
Yes.
Okay, so I want to ask you about America First, but first, let's start with the Christian nationalist piece. Obviously, they both run into each other. When you say you're a Christian nationalist, what do you mean by that?
I believe that America's a Christian nation.
Yeah.
Which is sort of in the name. Christian nationalist, America's a Christian nation. And I think that Christianity is an essential part of America's identity. Fundamentally, I think that America should have a Christian government, is what I think that ultimately comes down to. Amen. And if you want to get very specific and detailed about it, I believe that only Christians should be legislators, judges, and in the executive branch.
Amen.
I think that if Christianity is right and true, if God has a law, then our government should follow that. I think that's historically our identity. I think that's the truth. I think that's consistent with what our civilization is. So I would start there. I think that we should have a fully Christian government.
What do you think? I agree wholeheartedly. Lex Rex, the law is above the king. I'm actually comfortable with the king. I think just because of America's founding and history, I think we could functionally get there, but I don't think we would ever call someone a king. It's just not in our blood as Americans. There's an aversion to that. But even if there was a monarch, the law of God is still ultimately the ruler, Lex Rex, the law above the king. In terms of the law of God, we have all these statutes throughout the Old Testament, and then many of them restated and some new ones in the New Testament. But the summary of the law would be the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments, Exodus chapter 20. That really summarizes the law. And then Jesus summarizes it even further when he says, the first and greatest commandment is to love the Lord our God with all our heart, soul, mind, strength. And the second is like it, that we should love our neighbor as ourselves. All of the law, he continues, and the prophets they rest on these two commandments. So the way I see it is, Jesus is love God, love neighbor. That being a summary of a summary, being the Decalogue, the 10 Commandments. The 10 Commandments, there's 10 of them, but really they fall into two tables. You have the first 4 of the 10 Commandments. Now I know Catholics and Protestants, we count them a little differently, but in the Protestant case, it's the first 4 of the 10 Commandments are in regards to how to love God. Have no other gods before me. Don't make graven images. Don't take the Lord's name in vain, and remember the Sabbath and keep it holy. The next 6 is love for neighbor. Right? It's honor your father and mother. Don't murder. Don't commit adultery. Don't steal. Don't bear false witness, and don't covet. And so Jesus says, love God, love neighbor. The 10 Commandments, this is how to love God with a little bit more specificity, and how to love neighbor. And then everything else all these Old Testament civil statutes, they ultimately fall underneath one of the 10 commandments, whether it's a parapet around the border of your roof, right? You have to have like this railing. Well, they don't have HVAC during the summer months. They're sleeping on the roof, and you're loving your neighbor by making sure he doesn't fall off in the middle of the night and break his leg. So even that you can root to the commandment, the 6th commandment, thou shalt not murder. Stated in the positive sense would be thou shalt protect and esteem the safety and dignity of human life. So we can look at that even in our Western context and say, well, that's silly. That's primitive. You Bible thumpers. Well, we have laws about speed limits and seatbelts and we're just not up on the roof anymore. But find me a 2-story balcony in anybody's home that doesn't have a railing, right? And if it didn't, eventually there'd probably be a legal issue. So it's not that different. We're like that still to this day. So if we're going to have laws, I'd like to see them modeled off of the scripture. So my question, I guess, to you though, is this is where I see a lot of Christians start to say, well, not that. The first table of the law. A lot of guys will say, yeah, we need laws as it pertains to loving neighbor, protecting his safety, these kinds of things. But I don't want blasphemy laws. Like, what about, the first of the 10 commandments, we can't have that, all 10 commandments on a courthouse. It's like, well, I have bad news for you. We can't do that because freedom of religion, which I look at freedom of religion and I, at some level as a Christian, I'm like, so freedom for idolatry? Like, I mean, what is that other than like, hey, in America, we protect the freedom for people to worship sand demons and erect 90-foot tall statues to some
Vivek,
false god. I think that we've always had blasphemy laws. It's not whether but which. And I'm not saying some kid who says JC should go to jail, but like the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence gyrating in front of a man dressed up like Christ on a cross in a public parade. Believe it or not.
if you've seen the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, look them up. It's really infuriating to see what people would do to desecrate Christianity and to desecrate Jesus. Truthfully, horrible.
Jail. Right away, jail.
Right.
Would you agree with that?
I would. I think I would agree with that. And I think that it's interesting how people in this country have such an aversion to anything that looks or sounds like that. But you look at very modern countries in the Middle East, for example, like the United Arab Emirates. People go to Dubai, and this is a hotspot for the world's rich, for entertainers. And a lot of people go there who are pretty secular and pretty liberal. But everybody knows that when you go to Dubai or Riyadh, for that matter, or any of these Gulf countries, which are very wealthy, very modern, technologically sophisticated, and cosmopolitan even, everybody knows the rules. And the rules are you don't disrespect Islam. And the whole country abides by that. And there's laws governing public displays of affection, modesty, all kinds of things. And nobody seems to have a problem because they know they don't mess around there. They take their religion seriously. And when you land at that airport, everybody knows you got to play by those rules. And people seem to be okay with that. But for some reason in America, even the insinuation that you might have something like that for Christ, for the church, people say it's the handmaiden's tale.
Right.
It's Gilead. This is regressive. What is this?
It's a good point he's making. If you're watching this video, you probably agree with most of the things he says. But why? America has always been a Christian nation. It has been founded on Christianity, founded by Protestants, whom I have a couple disagreements with, but nevertheless, founded on Christianity. Why shouldn't we have some law to respect Christianity, respect Christ in some way? When all of these Muslim countries, I mean, I can't even go to Mecca, for example, because I'm not a Muslim. I'm a Catholic. Why can't we have some laws that resemble what he's talking about in these Muslim countries that are very secular, very wealthy? We deserve Christ. Jesus deserves to be respected by the people that live in his blessed land, in his country that was literally founded on Christianity. It just doesn't make sense to me why we can't have a little bit more reverence. And again, this does go with the population, but we're going to let him speak about it.
It's the Middle Ages. And maybe I'm more liberal than you. I don't know what the penalties would be specifically, but I think certainly the government needs to enforce some level of morality.
Yes.
Within reason. And I think what you're talking about when you say the perpetual indulgence, these are deliberately subversive,
Yes.
morally subversive. There's no positive good where that could be defended.
I have a question for everybody in the chat, everybody in the comments. In the I'd say 50, 60, 70 years ago, when Christianity was more popular in this country, I don't know of any different laws that would prohibit the government or allow the government to kind of enforce things that Nick is talking about and Joel's talking about, like anything anti-Christian, right? The Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, for example. 100 years ago, I don't know is the government allowed to enforce laws against people like that? Or what I think, the culture was more religious at that time. So the lack thereof groups like Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence existing back then, which maybe they did, but they didn't become popular, in my opinion, because the culture was religious. The culture was majority Christian, and what happened was shaming was allowed to go on, and so people like that didn't exist. Were there any people like in the government, or was there any government program or something that prohibited these people from existing? I'm not sure. Again, we want to finish this stream, but that's just my question for you guys.
Right.
I don't know that I would outlaw, let's say, heresy, because there should be room for religious debate. It's like there always has been in the church or at different councils and things like that. But something that is deliberately and intentionally meant to blaspheme and offend God and the morals of any decent person, I don't think there's any basis for that. And so, of course, in America at the same time, we have a tradition of freedom of speech, but maybe we need to articulate what the basis of free speech is. Why is free speech good? If free speech is good insofar as we could debate about what form of government is best or what kind of society we should have, I'm willing to be more liberal when it comes to things like that. But filth, which is like pornography, for example,
Right.
what actually, that's not political speech.
No.
And I don't think there's anything positively good. I don't even actually consider it speech.
It's not religious speech either.
No.
Although I have seen some Jews say that both abortion and pornography are Jewish religious sacraments. To them.
It's true.
Very
It's
interesting.
true. They have.
So I tend to agree. I don't, like I said, I'm probably not as conservative when it comes to religious law as maybe you are or some Protestants, or even for that matter, some traditional Catholics who say there should be no freedom of religion, which is, I think, what you're saying. But I certainly think that there should be some basic standards like they have in Russia or any other country.
So from my position, I think that it's just, there are degrees. So like Tom Cruise, Minority Report, like I don't want, where we're predicting crimes and even policing. When I think of Old Testament Israel, the actual Jews, I think of, there's not really a police system, right? So there's punitive justice, but they're not going around, with back to the parapet, the border on the roof. There's at least no recording in the Old Testament of the parapet committee, that would go house to house, annually to measure and make sure that they hit the metrics. It's like, you need to have a parapet. And if you don't, then you get arrested. No. If you don't, then you're liable if something happens, right? So if you don't have a border on your roof and nobody ever gets hurt, no harm, no foul. If somebody does get hurt and you had a border, then it's on them. If they do get hurt and you didn't have a border, now you're liable. The same with like a bull, that's accustomed to gore. Well, you could have a violent bull, but if nobody gets gored, you're okay. But if they do, and you've already, you've known, and that can be proven in a court that you knew that this was a dangerous animal, and it hurt someone, then it's not just that the animal, the bull is stoned, according to the Old Testament, and so is the owner. Personally, the general equity of that principle, I'll get some flack for this, but I'd apply it to pit bulls. You can have a pit bull, but that dog is genetically bred in such a way that it is extremely dangerous, especially to children. And so you can own a pit bull. In America, I'd say that you can own a tiger if you want. But if you own a golden retriever and it has a really bad day and does something, tragic, the golden retriever is put to death, and you're probably going to have to go to court and those kinds of things. But I don't think you get locked in jail. But you have a pit bull that has that reputation, and the pit bull kills, 2 little 5-year-old girls. The pit bull gets put down, and so do you. That would be my position. So I say all that to say, one, there are degrees, but two, also just the system itself. It's less of a policing. So there's actually a lot of freedom. Like people are like, well, I don't want the government, to tell me what to do in my bedroom. Well, the government currently tells you how to build your bedroom, right? The studs have to be this many inches between.
Hey, man, that's a good point. Every single thing, you have to follow all of these regulations to have this home that you had. That's a very good point.
We police everything. And it's also costly. Like when you think of just how much, management is required, how many taxes we're spending for people to tell us every single thing to do. But a system that's punitive and retributive, rather than, constantly trying to predict and stop crimes before they even occur. And then in terms of the degrees, the last thing I would say is,
what he's talking about, it's true, and it's only going to get worse. I mean, you see what's happening with Palantir. Eventually, there's going to be something tragic that happens. It's only a matter of time. And people like Peter Thiel and Musk and everybody involved with Palantir, they're going to usher forth this AI surveillance technology where they will be able to predict crimes before they happen. And if you have seen Captain America Winter Soldier, those are the bad guys. That's what the bad guys want to do in Captain America Winter Soldier. They want to eliminate the threats via the helicarriers before they happen. Captain America stops them, whatever. But I thought we were all in agreement, predictive forms of policing are really, really bad. And saying, oh, this thing's going to happen, so we're going to prevent it before it happens is really, really bad. I thought morally we were all on the same page. But I guess some people are not.
We're not talking about the Muslim police that go into private homes and are rounding people up. So a lot of this for me, when it comes to the first table of law and things like idolatry and false religions, the major factor there would be there's a difference between sins and crimes. And I think you have to have that category, that distinction. There's plenty of sin. I have sin. But the state has no business in punishing sin. That belongs to the church, whether it's confession or whether it's excommunication or barred from the sacraments or whatever it may be.
It's a good point.
For a time, sin is dealt with by ultimately God and through the avenue of the church. Crimes are dealt with by the state. And there are some sins that...
This is a very good perspective. I love what he's saying. Have the sins be punished by the church and the crimes be punished by the courts. Brilliant. Yes, I wholeheartedly agree.
Biblically speaking, are not crimes. It is a sin, but it's not a crime. So I would say Muslims worshiping in their homes is not a crime. Muslims erecting a 90-foot tall statue outside of Houston, I think that's a crime. And I think people involved with that should have some kind of...
I agree, man. And you have to think about the people that led us here, right? This all goes on the boomers. Most of the blame goes on the boomers, who were the most tolerant generation. And they allowed everything to come to this point. But at the end of the day, man, you can't allow false gods in a country that's supposed to be a Christian country. All these cultures come in, you're supposed to assimilate into America. You're supposed to adopt American culture. What's American culture? Christianity, at least cultural Christianity. Everybody's not Christian. Completely understand that. But culturally, adopt the morals and the values. Not erecting a 90-foot statue in Texas, which is what he's talking about. And then you have the Hindu temple, too, that's currently being constructed in Texas. It's what is going on here? At a certain point, we have to go back to our roots. We have to honor our creator, the very being that allowed us to even exist in this country, that has been... aiding us and helping us to have everything that we have. I mean, we are blessed truly as Americans by God because of everything that he's given us as a country, as individuals, compared to the rest of the world. It's time that we actually honor our creator and honor our God. So that's all it is.
Penalty, whether it's a fine, this, that, or the other, and the statue should be ground to dust. We don't do that here. This is America. We're a Christian nation. Say Christ is Lord.
Again, just like these really rich Muslim countries, they don't have statues of Jesus that are 90 feet high. And whatever, that is what it is. But we should honor our creator. We should honor Christ here because this is a Christian nation. It just doesn't make sense to me, the people that say, oh, they should be allowed to bring all of their stuff here. It's like, they're coming from shitty places. This is America. This is God's country.
That would be my view. Would you, so now giving it a little bit more specificity, what do you think about that?
I like that. I like that approach, because I think when people hear moral law, they hear moral police.
That's what they hear. Yeah.
Right. And what they think about is that you're going to have inquisitors kicking down the door if somebody's watching an R-rated movie,
right,
or something like that, which I think anybody would be opposed to, and rightly so. I believe in liberty.
Right.
And I think that part of that comes with, I also like the distinction of crime and sin. People do have the liberty to sin, and that's why we have the sacraments, because we're going to sin. And we don't want to sin, and we try not to, but it's not a crime to do that. And we're supposed to be given a chance to repent and to spiritually grow. So I do like that.
I would also like to comment real quick about the way this is shot. I'm not going to talk about it for a long time, but just the way that this whole thing is so perfectly shot. You see the camera angles going around slowly. It's panning from different directions. Really big fan of this.
Distinction. And I don't know that I would necessarily agree with the death penalty in many or even most cases. I tend to be anti-death penalty in almost all, except for terrorists or...
Get him, Nick.
What about murder?
It depends on the type of murder.
I didn't know this about you.
Yeah, I think even murderers should be spared, yeah.
Really? Why?
Because I think they should be given a chance.
So you really like the current pope then, huh?
Well,
he just said that.
Yeah, I tend to think that the death penalty is no longer totally necessary. I think in the old days, you literally needed to kill these people because you really couldn't accommodate them in prison forever. But now I think that society can accommodate that, and I think that only the most heinous crimes should be punished by
no eye for an eye.
Death. I think everybody else, it should be given the room. One, I do really worry about the killing of innocent people that are falsely convicted.
Yeah,
that's a huge part of it. But also I think that people should be given a chance to repent. And I don't think those are necessarily our lives to take, even for the government. So I tend to be more, and maybe that's because I'm a political dissident, so I'm a little biased.
Yeah.
I tend to get anxious when I think about the government having license to freely kill people,
Yeah, that's going to be me.
They do it anyway, I suppose, extrajudicially all the time. But no, I tend to be more against the death penalty than for it.
Okay, so with the death penalty, I have to go on record saying, in the case of murder, I think that the death penalty is not only permissible, but biblically speaking, I think that it's mandated. And I root that not just in the Decalogue, but the Noahic covenant. And if any man takes another man's life, he forfeits his own. So, but as it pertains to what we were talking about just right before that, so sins versus crimes, not policing, that made you feel like, okay, I could see that. In terms of now, like degrees of punishment, and the death penalty being the highest capital punishment, the way that I read the Old Testament, because in the Old Testament, it's not just murder, right? In Genesis 9, Noahic covenant, that's there. But then you start getting into Leviticus and, Numbers, and it's like, if you carry, a bundle of sticks on the Sabbath, death, an unruly son who's disrespectful, who strikes his father, in rebellion, death. I'll admit, as a Christian pastor, I've read the Bible once or twice, and the death penalty is pretty. God's pretty generous with the death penalty in the Old Testament. Pretty liberal with that. And one thing that really helped me, I remember reading one theologian, and his name is Rushduni, and he talked about so think of it like this: the state of Texas, like you'll see, don't mess with Texas, which. Sadly, I can tell you,
it's a lie.
You can absolutely mess with Texas. Texas is pretty limp-wristed, sadly. But don't mess with Texas. Don't litter, and you'll see the signs. And it's like littering can be penalized up to, and so it's like the implication is there's a scale, and so it's like up to $5,000 fine or 2 years in prison. But I personally, I don't know about you, but I don't know anybody who's currently doing hard time, for throwing away a candy wrapper out of the car window. But I think the reason it's there is because even though it seems silly, like nobody would do that. I mean, there are some actually retarded people in the world who might. I think of the repeat offender, so it's like, it's one thing if it's like, you throw a candy wrapper out. But like, what if you've been pulled over, like 47 times this year for littering? And then you got bigger and bigger to where you're like, you're burning all of your trash and rubber tires in the backyard to own the libs, meanwhile you're literally destroying the earth. And then, and it's just more and more. Well, eventually it's like, yeah, I think you actually should go to prison. Mm-hmm. Even then I wouldn't say the death penalty. But when I look at all these Old Testament laws outside of murder, life for life, eye for eye, tooth for tooth, I think that's proportional justice. But in those cases where it's not murder, you're not taking a life, I think, the death penalty is often cited, but I think it's cited kind of like the litter sign in Texas. I think it's cited as a maximum penalty and would be reserved. Like, as I've studied, if a son strikes his father in rebellion, he's put to death. I've read like a bunch of historians and different guys. There's actually not one case in all of Old Testament Israel's history of that ever being carried out. So it's like, here's this law, and I don't think it's just that it wasn't enforced. I think they knew, right? We have what's inscripturated. We don't have all the side conversations and things like that. I think they knew, like, this is not just like a 5-year-old throwing a tantrum, right? This is, and even next to it says, or if he is a drunkard. It's not talking about a little kid. It's talking about a grown man with his elderly parents publicly shaming mom and dad with just debauchery and rebellion. And likely, I think we're meant to assume.
So what Pastor Joel Webbon is talking about is having the death penalty available for these like low stakes crimes, just as a means to prevent people from committing these crimes, is what I think. This is what I'm getting at. He's trying to say, what I'm interpreting. And I don't know about that, because his argument is that, if you have the death penalty for something like littering, for example, then people are going to be so scared to commit it. I hope I'm interpreting this right, by the way. They're going to be so scared to litter because of the death penalty that they won't litter. And the problem with that is that we have some really crazy people in this country. And even if you say, if you strike your father, right, you will be publicly hanged or whatever, even if you threaten that and you make it a law, we have some very crazy people in this country, to the point where if they do commit one of these small offenses, or even if they do, something a little bit more severe than that, like he's talking about, we do have people that are willing to test that just because. Like, people are really mentally in this country. So how are you gonna enforce it in that regard? That's kind of the question I would ask.
Repeat offender. He's been brought, before the elders in Israel and told he needs to get in line, and there's zero restraint, and it's not just a personal insult like slap one cheek, turn the other, but he's violent, he's dangerous, he's a liability, he's criminal, and I think that to the nth degree can go all the way up, although they never had to enforce it, but could theoretically go all the way up to death. That helps me.
Sorry about that. I think what he's talking about, they never had to enforce it. Maybe it was a much different time back then. And I just, again, would like to bring to the attention, like, we have a lot of mentally ill people in this country. And I think they would have to enforce it in modern day if we were to implement those kind of laws.
Like when I think of homosexuals, for instance, it's like, Joel, so do you think all homosexuals should be stoned? And it's like, well, bullets are little stones, like that. Like, I don't think we have to pick up. But no, I'm being facetious. No, I don't. But I think that I think it's a sin, and I think that it can become a crime. So it's one thing if it's two guys. That's how the whole slippery slope happened. They're like, we just want the same rights as you. But yeah, but then you gave them an inch, and now it's like, hey, kids in the public library, sit in my lap as I'm dressed up as a drag queen, and we're going to put porn in all of your books, and we're going to so I think that, like, or in New York, a gay pride parade with grown men with their genitalia hanging out in front of children on the sideline. Like, okay, now we're talking about a crime,
right?
And even then, I'm not saying immediately it has to.
100%, man. That should be a crime. It's just, it's so disgusting what we allow in this society, man.
A crime, some kind of penalty, and then are they so brazen they turn around next year and do it again?
Right.
And do it again. What do you do if it's like the 10th year anniversary? They've been doing it for a decade running. Every single time you find them or you did it, like, eventually.
I understand what he's saying, but I really don't think that we as human beings have the right to put others to death. honestly, I do not. I don't think we have that right. Obviously, there's going to be murder. 100% there's going to be murder, but it doesn't give us the right to take another person's life. I believe that only goes to God. Only God has that right to take somebody else's life, to take them when it's their time. The ability to take a life, murder, all of that stuff, capital punishment for things like he's talking about. There's another way. It's called imprisonment. Just put them away. But I really, really don't believe that we have the ability to take another human life, no matter what the crime. Most instances, no matter what crime, in most cases.
There has to be a harsher penalty. So that's, even that, I know a lot of our listeners would be like, that's hardcore, but like, I think it helps, honestly, because a lot of people will point to the Old Testament, God's punishment. They'll say he's severe, he's too.
Why not drain them financially? Like, not just like a small fine, like $10,000, $20,000, $30,000, like in accordance with what they make. Why not a financial penalty like that to make them hurt monetarily instead of taking their life? $100,000, you're in debt to the system now. Something like that for a crime like walking naked in a pride parade in front of kids, if we're going to talk about that specific thing. But even in a broader regard, why not like a real financial penalty? Something like not bullshit like $1,000, couple that, like no, like $100,000 if you're going to do something like that. Or you have both. You have a financial penalty with time served or something like that. Some combination, whatever you have to do not to take a life.
Harsh. I like fleshing this out, if nothing else, just to defend the character of God. That like God actually isn't harsh. He knew what he was doing. He knew what he was thinking. And there are conceivable, even in our modern society, there are conceivable.
And he's also talking about not to let him, just not let him talk, but he is talking about the Old Testament, and specifically in the Old Testament, we know it's a fallen world. We understand that. That's why Christ came, and in the Old Testament, things are much different. They're much more rugged back then. So that's why all of this stuff happened. But I don't know. I don't agree with going back to stuff like that, specifically for the case of enforcing laws.
Situations. And our mind immediately goes again to the 5-year-old kid who said, "Dad, I'm mad at you." That's not what the Old Testament was talking about. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's very helpful, because I think there is, rightly so maybe, I think there is such an aversion to that in the public consciousness, the idea of an executioner swinging an axe because of, and you're Protestant because someone said a swear word. Like that's the kind of thing that people think.
Right.
And I can't help it, me being from a very liberal city like Chicago, and even growing up in a suburb that was pretty liberal and permissive, I think, and as an American, there's just sort of a natural aversion to that.
Yeah, there is.
And to kind of an extremely punitive justice system. And I have to tell you, as a Christian, I don't come away from the gospel thinking that the state should be liberal with murder, should be liberal, let's say, with the death penalty. Yeah. I, with that being said, believe that people should be put in prison. There should be a lot more people in prison. And I've said before on my show, I think the prisons should be made more humane, because then we could put more people there for longer. The reason that we don't like prison a lot is because the prison is like...
it's actually a liberal point. This is like the argument that a lot of liberals make. And you can't put Nick in that box. But this is something... I got him with the crazy eyes here right now that I paused it. But like, this is something that I align more with. Like, we shouldn't go so hard with the death penalty at meaningless things like littering, like Joel was bringing that example up. I do happen to side with Nick when it comes to this stuff. Like, yes, let's make jail more hospitable, more about rehabilitation, instead of getting these repeat offenders. They're in, then they're out, then they're in, then they're out, because like it's just not fixing things. I believe in that.
You can die in prison. You get raped in prison.
Right.
It's inhumane in some ways, but I think that we should make them maybe more modern and nicer, so we feel comfortable sending people there so that they can be rehabilitated. I do believe that we should have a society that's forgiving, but I also agree that what you're describing, I don't think anybody has a problem with in principle, which is that people that cannot get along in society should be removed from society, whether that's put in a box forever or whether they get the death penalty
or banishment.
Ostracism,
Banishment would be something on the table.
exile, anything like that. And it is helpful to think of the worst case scenario. Because I think you strike me as a warm-hearted person. I'm a warm-hearted person. I don't think that society should be looking to inflict punishment on people. However, evil exists. And it is instructive to think of the worst case examples. Like as a Catholic, I think of Satanists who will go and steal one of the blessed hosts.
He's talking about the Black Mass. That happened in Kansas City, Missouri a couple months ago. I covered it on the show. Nobody watched. It's awful. You see these people. That is the devil. If you haven't encountered or seen the devil before, you Google a video of the Black Mass in Kansas City, Missouri, I believe it was, a couple months ago. They literally broke into a church. They took the Eucharist. They took the body of Christ, and they performed a Black Mass ritual. What he's talking about, very true. People do this, and ironically, they only do it at the Catholic churches. So what does that tell you about the one true faith? Anyway, that's a separate thing. He's very correct.
Go and steal the bread during the Mass and use it in a Black Mass or to desecrate it. And someone who is doing that, I think, should get the death penalty because that is the body of Christ. So, maybe coming at it from a different point of view.
Different point.
I can understand it
but
more.
I do appreciate that, although we have different views on the sacraments. I do appreciate that because that's not the Satanist physically hurting any person, neighbor, but that's actually a desecration of God, according to the Catholic view. So that would be a first table, like love the Lord.
Right.
And I appreciate that because even among Protestants, like I've gotten a lot of pushback, a lot of Protestants who are like devout in love the Lord and want to see America be a Christian nation. There's just something in their American DNA, when I would argue modern American, because America wasn't actually always this way. America we had blue laws, Sabbath laws. We had blasphemy laws, right? So it's not even just once upon.
See, I wasn't aware of that. That's my ignorance. Back in the video, earlier part of the video, I said, did the government have laws to, have these, have Christianity be respected? Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence, like that wouldn't have been able to happen. I asked the question back in the chat, but that's interesting. I didn't know we had these. That's on me, folks. My ignorance.
Upon a time in Israel. No, it's like it's been done before, it's been done recently, and it's been done here.
Right.
It actually is American. Actually is. Hasn't been for a little while, but actually is. But yet what I'm saying is that a lot of these Protestants who really love God, I'm not questioning that, and really want the country to be Christian, they still, anything within the first table. So they would differ from you. They'd be like, yeah, murder is capital punishment. But the example that you gave, like something that's exclusively only a blaspheming the church, blaspheming Christ, they would say, well, yeah, that's really bad, and that should be frowned upon. But the state has no business enforcing any kind of moral law of God within the first table of the law. Love the Lord your God. Don't make any graven images. Don't take his name in vain. Remember the Sabbath. And the fact that you actually have like a case study that would fall in that category is based. I like it.
Good.
So,
well, yeah, because that's something that can never be excused or pardoned.
I have to say, I don't know, man. I still fall on the point where I don't feel like we have the right as human beings, as a government, to be able to take somebody's life. Unless, of course, it is one of the extreme scenarios. But I'm gonna admit I haven't thought about that at all in terms of like capital punishment for somebody that does break into a Catholic church and do the Black Mass, like the Satanists do. I don't know. I still tend to fall on the side of we don't have the right to take a human life. At this moment in time, that's where I currently stand. So, but very interesting. So I do differ from both of them on that topic.
And with good intent. Nobody would accidentally, that is so intentional and so malicious Nobody would accidentally
He's right. Nobody would accidentally do that. However, I do strongly feel that everybody is worth being redeemed. Everybody is redeemable. Mary Magdalene she had all of these demons, but she was redeemed. So that's kind of how I fall on it. Like, I understand, like, yes, this is a very evil, Satanist, awful act, but everybody has a chance at redemption no matter what they do, in my humble opinion.
Conspire to take the Blessed Sacrament and desecrate it in an evil ritual by accident or with good intent, or
that also doesn't mean that they should just be allowed to roam free after that. That's a conversation for later, but I really don't think that we should have the ability to take a human life. Again, it's a very fine line, but I really don't believe in eye for an eye. Everybody is redeemable. All right, folks, what did you think about that video? Let me know in the comments. Give the video a like, subscribe to the channel. If you would like to see part 2 of this interview and my reaction to it, you can see that right here.